Okay, so the previous video that you had access to was just basically back to elementary school. What is a least common denominator between two fractions and how do you find them? So we're taking it one step further. We're going to focus only on the least common denominator of these 6 problems, and then the next video we'll start doing the restrictions, the least common denominator, and the actually adding and subtracting them, the actual operation. All right, so remember, the least common denominator is what both of them have in common. Well, in number 1, we have an 8v under each one. They are common, so we're done. Our least common denominator is 8v. Easy peasy. When the denominators are the same, you don't have to do anything. So on number 2, again, I've got 6m cubed n under the first fraction, and I've got 6m cubed n under the second. They are exactly the same, nothing's different. That is my common denominator, 6m cubed n. So then we get to number 3, okay? So I have an x minus 1 here. I have a 4 here. They have absolutely nothing in common. One is a number, one is a binomial. They can't divide each other out. So all we're going to do here, like the last example on the basic video, is we're just going to multiply our two denominators together, and that is going to be my least common denominator. So I am going to have 4 times x minus 1 as my denominator of my final answer. Okay, same thing here on number 4. I have an x plus 7 here. I have an x minus 8 here. I have 2 binomials. They're not the same. There's no GCF that I can factor out of either one of them. So I'm just going to multiply them together. So my common denominator is going to be x plus 7 times x minus 8. It really is this simple, okay? And that's why I wanted to just focus on the least common denominators for a minute. Now, here on number 5, I've got a 3 here, and I've got 12x minus 8 here. I've got a single number, and I've got a binomial. Now, up here, our binomials didn't have any GCFs. They were just as basic as they could be. But down here, I have a GCF in this binomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor that out. So I know that I have a 4 that will go into both 12 and 8. So I'm going to factor that 4 out. 12x divided by 4 is 3x, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. Okay, so now I have got, I'm going to change colors here. I've got a 3, I have a 4, and I have a 3x minus 2. So I am going to do exactly what I've been doing before. These 3 things are not common, so I'm going to multiply them. 3 times 4 is 12 times 3x minus 2. Now what you'll notice is, as I'm putting these numbers with binomials and binomial with binomial, number with binomial, I am not distributing, okay? Now, it's not wrong to distribute, but we're going to keep it very basic here so that you guys are understanding the process and not confusing yourself whether you need to factor or multiply. So we're going to just leave it factored. Okay, here is another one. We've got, go back to green, I've got n plus 5, and I've got 2n plus 6. But notice here, I have a common factor here in 2n plus 6, don't I? So I am going to factor out a 2. 2n divided by 2 is n. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now I have n plus 5 times 2 times n plus 3. Okay, well, I've got 3 things again, but 2 of them aren't numbers, so I can't multiply those and make it simple. So I'm going to do 2 times, I'm going to go ahead and put the n plus 3. It doesn't matter if the n plus 3 goes before the n plus 5 or not. You could switch the position of those two. That's not a big deal. and this is my least common denominator. Now I'm going to do one more. Let's say that we had this problem above, 5 over n plus 5 plus 4n over 2n plus 10. Okay, so I've got my n plus 5, and I've got 2n plus 10, but I've got a GCF here. So I am going to factor out my 2. Oops, factoring by 2. So I end up with n plus 5. All right, now at this point, I do have an n plus 5 in common in both of them. If you have it in common in both, remember up here at the very top, when it was in common, that was just written once in our least common denominator. Same thing. Down here, I'm going to go ahead and write my n plus 5 one time. And that leaves the 2 that I need to bring along. So I did my n plus 5 once, and then I did my 2. So the things they have in common only happens once in the least common denominator. The things they don't have in common get combined. Now, I kept this straightforward to just binomials. If we have a denominator that is a trinomial, we are going to go ahead and factor first and then find our least common denominator. Don't try to find your least common denominator without factoring your trinomial. Okay, now let's get to the next video where we actually start adding and subtracting them.